Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu nusalli ala rasulil karim ma ba'd. So the topic of today is moon sighting and the Sharia perspective on how the moon sighting is to be done, whether it's to be locally sighted or globally sighted, or what about the calculations method, the astronomical calculations. So the topic of moon sighting has been a subject of discussion in the Muslim Ummah, particularly in modern times since science has taken over our lives. And also, unfortunately, because the Muslims have started regarding science and scientific technology and discoveries as a decisive mechanism over Sharia, and started manipulating the Sharia evidences in accordance with science, with the advent of astronomical calculations and the proposition of a global sighting system. However, the position that remains in accordance with Quran and Sunnah, we're going to take a look at that, and the practice of the companions of the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Sahaba. And what about the consensus of the Ummah for over 1450 years? And all of that, if we take into account, we will find that that consensus, the the Quran, what the Quran talks about, what the Hadith and the Sunnah talks about, of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala majma'in that talks about, and the consensus, the ijma, and the practice of the ummah for the last 1450 years or so, is that of the traditional local moon sighting. And so this talk will explore the evidences that support this stance, and we're going to talk about why there's a group that has gone and taken a different path in that strategy. But before we start discussing moon sighting, we must first establish how the rulings of the Sharia are decided. Where do the rulings or the ahkam of Sharia are derived from, and how are they decided? So Islamic law is based on four fundamental sources. Number one, the Quran. Number two, the Sunnah. Number third, the ijma or the consensus. And number four, the qiyas, also called as the ijtihad, which is the analogical reasoning. So, and they are taken in that order. The very first thing we look at is Quran. The second is Sunnah. The third is ijma. If you don't find something in Quran, or if it's there but it's not clear, it's confusing, then we go to the Sunnah. The Sunnah is preserved in two fashions. First, in the written form, which is called the Hadith, and second, as the ta'ammul of the Ummah, and by that we mean the practice of the Ummah, something that has been in the practice of the Muslim Ummah for years and years, and that is also called Sunnah. That's not recorded as form of a Hadith, but it's recorded in the form of the action of the Ummah or the ta'ammul of the Ummah. And finally, when something is not clear from either of those, then we do qiyas or ijtihad. But ijtihad, there are certain conditions of ijtihad. Okay, we cannot just take any issue of Islam and say, look, we need to do ijtihad on that. That's not the way it works. Ijtihad is not done or never done on those issues that are clearly established in the past. Okay, and there's no confusion on those things. So, first of all, ijtihad is only applicable on issues which are completely new. A completely new issue arises that never existed in the past. For example, I'm just quoting it as an example. Test tube babies, in vitro fertilizations, IVF, or also known as test tube babies. That thing never existed in the past. So now with the technological advancement, this issue came up. That requires ijtihad. I'm not going to talk about what was the ruling on that, because that's not the topic of today. But that's something that requires ijtihad, and based on the usul and the rules that we have established in the past. So that's one of the things where completely new ijtihad is needed. Second, the issue has been around for a while, but certain conditions have changed, and so that requires rulings to change, so that the conditions have changed in such a drastic manner that practicing it as originally prescribed becomes difficult or impossible. If that is the case, then ijtihad is needed. Okay, or a confusion is created about that ruling, about that ahkam or hukum. For example, I'll give you an example. Performing salah. Now, salah is established. 5 times salah is obligatory. Uh, there's no doubt in there. It's all clearly established. There will never be a need for ijtihad as to how many prayers you need to pray as an obligatory prayer. How many rakat in each prayer? There's no need for that. It's all clearly established. But when aircraft was invented in the last 100 or 150 years ago, then a question was raised whether performing salah on the floor of a plane is valid or not. Will that invalidate the salah, or is it okay to perform the prayer and the salah will be considered valid? Because that's not ground of the earth. Does performing salah requires the ground of the earth, or is it okay to pray on the air? And so the ruling was made then that no, the ground or the floor of an aircraft can be considered as the ground of the plane. Okay, and performing salah on it is perfectly valid, and so ijtihad was done on that in that context. So the issue was was clearly established in the past, but a condition changed, and that change required an ijtihad. Similarly, a third case where a hukum is discussed in Quran or Sunnah or Hadith, but it's not clear, 100% clear, and requires scholarly interpretations. And when it comes to that scholarly interpretation, then ijtihad is needed, and then mujtahideen may differ on those ijtihad. So there are countless examples of this in fiqh. Okay. So so the determining along the similar lines, the method of determining the start of an Islamic month is clearly established and has never been a matter of dispute in the history of Islam. The lunar cycle, or the moon, is the reference, and this is unanimously agreed upon. The only question that arises over here is, how should the moon be observed? If you examine Islamic history for 1300 years, I mean, I'm gonna ask you to skip the last 100 to 200 years, or 100 to 150 years, okay, because that have been where the rise of scientific technology was introduced, and science started to overcome or overwhelm the minds of people, including Muslims as well. But if you go beyond or past the 150 years or so, and take the 1300 years since the Prophet ﷺ's time, we will see that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until just over a century ago, there was no difference of opinion. And the opinion was that the moon was to be sighted visually, and it has to be done locally. So two things, both were clearly established. We will never see a single difference of opinion on that. The introduction of scientific advancement in the last 150 years or so started to cause problems. But that should not justify altering this ruling, because this is not a new issue that did not exist before. Ummah have been citing moon forever, since Rasulullah's time, and have been deciding the start of their month, and have been deciding the start of the Ramadan and the end of the Ramadan, the Eid and the Hajj and everything. And that had never been a cause of problems. If you open up the books of the fuqaha, you will find that there is no such difference of opinion in any of those things. Okay. Secondly, there is no need for ijtihad because of this. None of the hadith is ambiguous that is present in there. Okay. So if the evidences are clear and they're crystal clear on that, then it doesn't leave room for ijtihad. Secondly, the conditions for physical moon sighting have not changed to make it impractical or impossible. It's still as much practical as it was in the times of Rasulullah. And this also leaves no room for the new ijtihad to be done. There is no need for ijtihad in this thing. We will do ijtihad in all of those matters which require ijtihad, but definitely not on those things which are settled. Yet in the last century, some people, a group that was overly affected and influenced by Western philosophy and scientific advancement, they manufactured unnecessary conflict where no such conflict previously existed. They attempted to introduce global moon sighting. They attempted to introduce calculated dates into the discussion, despite the fact that such concepts have zero basis in Quran and Hadith and the actions of the Sahaba or the practice of the Ummah in the last, the 1300 years or so. If we turn to Quran, the ruling is clear. If we look at the Hadith, the command is clear. If we examine the practice of the companions, the Sahaba, the blessed Sahaba, there is no ambiguity. If we review 300 years of juristic consensus, ijma of the ummah, and the practice ta'ammul, there is complete clarity. Everything is crystal clear in all of these sources. The only accepted method is visual moon sighting, performed locally without reliance on any kind of astronomical calculations or global reports. There's not a single case in Islamic history where calculated moon sighting was used and accepted, nor where global moon sighting was the norm. So when something has been firmly established so much in Hadith, Sunnah, and Ijma, how can there be any room for ijtihad today on such a matter? We will not be doing or tolerating any ijtihad in how many salats are fixed, how many obligatory salat are there in a day. Everybody knows it's 5. There's no room for ijtihad. We will not accept any room for ijtihad in how many rakats should be for each salat. It's clearly established there's no room for that. Okay. So no matter what kind of conditions occur, no matter if we move to North Pole or South Pole, where a single day is like 6 months, sun never sets for 6 months, sun never rises for 6 months, the number of salats still clearly established as 5 a day. Okay, so there are what I'm trying to say over here is that we need to be clear upon there are certain issues for which there is no room for ijtihad. It's not like every time we move to a different era, every time something happens, we say, oh, let's do ijtihad on everything, and everything must be now changed. That's not the way it is. Okay, only certain things that have been impacted or affected to a degree which makes it impossible to act upon it, that requires ijtihad. And visual moon sighting by the eye, will always be effective. There is no need for any kind of other mechanisms in there. Similarly, local moon sighting is always applicable. For a sincere practicing Muslim, this argument is sufficient. And what is that argument? The global moon sighting and the calculation method contradict clear Islamic teachings. This alone should be enough to dismiss them outright. Any attempt to introduce these ideas, so for a normal Muslim, for a Muslim who is really, really concerned about Quran and Sunnah, for a Muslim who is deeply attached to the Quran and Sunnah, and who regards the Quran and Sunnah as the ultimate source of the ahkam, hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for that Muslim, the very first thing that Muslim would ask, if anybody would present a global moon sighting thing to him or her, that Muslim would say, where is that from Quran and Sunnah? And I want clear evidences. I don't want hanky-pankies. I don't want manipulations over the words. I don't want twisting and turning of things. Tell me as clearly as is there, as is present about the 5 times salah, that the global, show me the proof from the Quran and Sunnah that global moon sighting is there. Similarly, if anyone talks about, look, we are following the calculation, astronomical calculation for deciding the month, we're no longer visually sighting the moon and evidences, the very first thing a sincere Muslim would ask, show me the proof from Quran and Sunnah. Show me where Rasulullah said, calculate, it's okay, go ahead and calculate, you don't need to sight the moon. Show me these words. Okay, so this is the way you handle these kind of things. And then you will ask, and that Muslim or Muslimah would ask, okay, and I want to see the examples from the Sahaba as well, and from the Tabi'in as well. And from the later generations of the Muslims and the big fuqaha and the Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and Imam Malik rahimahullah and Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah and Imam Hanbal rahimahullah and the followers of those, they were big scholars, have gone by, have that were like that had mountains of knowledge with them of Islamic understanding. And I want to see their practice. I want to see their opinion. And I want to make sure that what you're telling me aligns with what they said, because they had mountains and mountains of knowledge, and we are 1450 years away from the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time. They were much closer. And ilm decreases over time, doesn't increase over time, as the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's hadith says. Is Sahih Hadith of Rasulullah that says, "Inna Allah la yakhbitul ilma intiza'an yantazi'hu min al-ibad, walakin yakhbitul ilma bi qabd al-ulama." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away the knowledge of Islam over a period of time. Not suddenly, but over a period of time by the death of the big scholars. Until a time would come, a time would come that there will not be, the people would take the ittakhad an-nasu ru'us al-jahala. People would pick the ignorant ones as the leaders. فَسُئِلُوا فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They will be asked about the rulings and the verdicts of the deen. They will have no idea about it because they lack knowledge. And they have they come up on YouTubes, they come up on Facebooks, they come up on Twitters and stuff, and they start talking about the fiqh, about the masail, about the deen, and they are not qualified to do so. They are not authentic. They reject everybody. They reject all the ummah, the past ulama and everything, and they want people to listen to them. They want people to subscribe to them and whatever, and have their followership. But Rasulullah says, فَسُئِلُوا فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. They will be asked questions about the deen. They will answer without knowledge. فَضَلُّوا وَضَلُّوا. They were themselves, they were already misguided, and they will misguide the people as well. حَتَّى إِذَا لَمْ يَبْقَ عَالِمٍ اتَّخَذَ النَّاسُ رُؤُوسَ جُهَالًا. Allah will take away the knowledge by the death of the big ulama, and their successors, the real scholars that with the depth of understanding will remain very few, and people will start listening most of all to those who have no knowledge at all. So this is, if I say like one thing for all, the strongest argument of all the arguments is that Prophet ﷺ did not do it, and the companions, the Sahaba, the blessed Sahaba, they didn't do it. They did not do global moonsighting. They did not do any calculations. They simply do visual moonsighting locally and regionally. And that is it. Does any Muslim need any other evidences beside this? I'm surprised. I'll be surprised. I hope not. Because this is how bid'ahs creep in. They enter into the deen. This is how deviations come. This is how misguidances creep into the deen. The moment we introduce something that neither the Prophet ﷺ did, nor the companions practiced, nor the rest of the ijma of the ummah talks about it, it's exact that moment we open the door to innovations, to bid'at, that can fundamentally alter the way we worship. So let's look at a hadith, and let's look at the hadith of Rasulullah that talks about the moon sighting. So Rasulullah said, "Sumu لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته فإن غم عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30." This is a hadith of Sahih Muslim. So there's and Bukhari. So there's obviously there's no doubt in its sanad. So Nabi Sallallahu says, fast when you see the moon. لرؤيته particularly talks about ru'ya, which is visually sighting at the moon. And break your fast. That means end the month of Ramadan, begin the month of Ramadan after you visually sight the moon, and begin the month of Ramadan after you see the moon of Shawwal. And when it's cloudy, if you're not able to see it, did Rasulullah say or ask to go and start calculations? No. Rasulullah says in another hadith, Rasulullah has said that the month lunar month is either 29 days or 30 days, one of these two. So if you cannot see the moon on the 29th, just complete the 30 days and that's it. You don't need to resort to any other thing. You don't need to resort to technology for this. Why? Because the hukum, the ahkam of Sharia are very, very simple. And they have to be kept simple. And we'll talk about more about it in a moment or so. That's one of the hadith. Okay. Similarly, another hadith also says, and that's also from Bukhari and Muslim, says, لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال ولا تفطروا حتى تروا فإن غم عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. So Rasulullah said, do not fast until you see the new moon. Okay, so until you see the month of Ramadan, you begin fasting only then, and you celebrate Eid. You finish up Ramadan when you see the moon of Shawwal. So again, that also talks about visually sighting the moon. And again, it says if it's cloudy, and Rasulullah here rejects the idea of moon birth, because moon birth is the new moon when it's born is not necessarily visually visible. Okay, it may be it's so young that it cannot, for all the clarity of all the weather, whatever it is, a person may not be able to see it. So Salams use the word فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ. غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ in Arabic means, and it implies that the moon is there present, and had it were the condition that the clouds were not there, had the climate been clear, had the weather been clear sky, you would definitely have seen the moon. But Rasulullah is saying, even if the moon is clearly present up there, but the clouds have covered it, and you know for sure, for some reason, that you must have, if the clouds would shed away, you would see the moon. But if you could not see it because of the cloud, okay, you should still complete 30 days and not just 29, and not just guess for whatever other reasons, whatever scientific proofs you have, whatever your calculations say, but you must be able to see it. This is the understanding the hadith gives us, and there's no difference of opinion on that. So these clearly tell us what we should rely upon and what we should not rely upon. Similarly, a group has certainly started favoring global moon sighting. I don't know where that came from. And also, this fitna, also you will see not before 100 years or 150 years. Only when the communication technology and science and everything took over our lives and we got overwhelmed by all of these, you will see that these fitna started to increase. Also, when Muslims started to migrate to other Western countries, and when they mingled with the Western non-Muslims, then these issues became more and more prominent, particularly when they did not make effort on their own aqidah. They did not make effort in their own strengthening their own knowledge of Islam. And when they started mingling with the non-Muslims, then the desire to get integrated with the other people started causing all of these issues. So there's a hadith of Sahih Muslim about the Sahaba. رأيت الهلال ليلة الجمعة ثم قدمت المدينة آخر الشهر. And this is a report by Hazrat Sayyidina Kuraib radiyallahu ta'ala, and he reported that al-Fadl sent him to Sham, Syria at that time. And at that time, Syria was not the same as the current Syria. Current Syria is just a single country. At that time, the Syria was the greater Syria, which included current Syria or Sham, Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon. These four countries together were known as Sham or Syria. And then they were broken by the non-Muslims, and they conquered and they divided into four countries. And one of them now contains the original name of Syria. But at that time, Syria was a bunch of these four countries: current Syria, current Lebanon, current Jordan, and current Palestine, altogether called Sham. So Sayyidina Kuraib radiyallahu ta'ala was sent by al-Fadl to Sham, where Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu anh was ruling for something, for some chore, for some task. And he says, I reached Sham and I saw the crescent there, the new moon there on Friday night. رأيت الهلال, I saw the new moon there ليلة الجمعة, on the Friday night when I reached there. ثم قدمت المدينة آخر الشهر, and then I returned to Medina at the end of the month. فسألني عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنه فقال, and Abdullah ibn Abbas, when I came to Medina back, there was the biggest faqih of the time. Abdullah ibn Masud was a very big faqih. Abdullah ibn Abbas was a very big faqih and scholar. So Abdullah ibn Abbas in Medina asked Kuraib, متى رأيتم الهلال? O Kuraib, when you were in Sham, when you were in Syria, which day did you actually see the moon? Which date and day? فقلت رأيناه ليلة الجمعة. He said, Kuraib said, O Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anh, I saw the moon there in Sham on Friday night. فقال أنت رأيته? Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh asked him again, did you see it also on Friday night? فقلت نعم, yes, I said yes, I did also. I also saw it. ورأه الناس, and other people also saw it. So there were like a big a group of witnesses that saw, and Kuraib himself saw. Wasamu, and they fasted. They began their fast from Saturday onwards, because when they saw the moon on Friday night, Ramadan begins on Saturday, the next day, and they fasted on the next day. Wasama Ma'awiyatun, or Sayyidina Muawiyah, who was the ruler, he also fasted along with them from Saturday onwards after seeing the moon on the Friday night. Faqal, so Ibn Abbas said in reply, and listen to it and hear it very, very well, what he said actually, because from here the rule of Sharia comes out. Lakinna ra'aynahu laylat as-sabti. Sayyidina Ibn Abbas said, no, but we here in Medina, we saw the moon on Saturday night, not on Friday night. You saw in Sham on Friday night and you began fasting from Saturday. We saw the moon in Medina on Saturday night, so we began fasting from Sunday morning. Okay. فلا نزال نصوم حتى نكمل 30 أو نراه. And Ibn Abbas said, so now we will continue fasting until we either complete 30 days or we see it on the 29th of the night, based on our calculation, based on our sighting, local sighting, not on the sighting of the Sham, in Syria, but on the sighting of Medina. And they were not very far away. If you look at the map, they're not very far away. I asked, Hazrat Kuraib radiallahu anhu said, أولا تكتفي برؤية معاوية وصيامه. Sayyidina Kuraib asked Ibn Abbas that don't you think it's enough for Sayyidina Muawiyah, the ruler of the Sham, to decide and start beginning that they sighted the moon on Friday night? Don't you think that's enough for you? And that they started their fast on Saturday, don't you think that's enough for you? Listen to what Ibn Abbas said. La hakaza amarana Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, that's not enough, because this is how the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded us to do. Okay, that we will follow the sighting of our local sighting on Medina. Sham will follow the sighting of the Sham. They will not follow the sighting of the Medina. Medina will not follow the sighting of Sham. Medina will follow the sighting of the Medina. And then he said, this is how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. And this is Muslim Hadith, so there's absolutely no objection, no doubt on the sanad of it, and that this in fact happened, and this in fact was the statement of Sayyidina Ibn Abbas anhuma, and it is prominently known that Ibn Abbas anhuma was one of the greatest faqih, one of the greatest scholar who had a very in-depth understanding of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then no Sahaba, none of the Sahaba present in Medina at that time, including Kuraib, they objected. None of them objected on his ruling. Everybody accepted him. So this hadith is a clear proof that moon sighting is by far definitely a local matter. And the practice of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in was never based on global sighting criteria. Never. They never looked at even Makkah. Okay. never looked at even the nearest city. All they did was local moon sighting. Despite knowing that the moon was seen in Sham, Ibn Abbas did not accept it from Medina, and this is a good enough proof, enough and sufficient proof that local moon sighting is the norm. Let's look at what the Muslim Ummah over the last 1400 years talks about this thing. The practice of the Ummah for the 1400 centuries has also been to rely on local moon sighting. Throughout Islamic history, every region or country, they all only followed its own sighting. And there was no concept of a unified global sighting system. Absolutely not. Okay, and let's look at let's look at the codes of the different ulama. Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah, very famous muhaddis who wrote the Sharah of Sahih al-Muslim, a very prominent muhaddis of his time. He says there is a difference of opinion among the scholars regarding whether the sighting of one land is binding upon others, and the correct view is that it is not binding, as indicated by the Hadith of the Kuraib. So the issue was discussed before as well. Okay, this is not a new issue. No matter how much some people put it like this, that hey, that was the old times, things were different, they didn't talk about this thing, issues have changed, we have to do an ijtihad now. Absolutely wrong. Not correct at all. They're trying to make a fool out of people. And just because people don't read, the Muslims unfortunately have gave up the habit of reading through Islamic books, through history, through other things. They just unfortunately seem to rely on YouTube scholars, Twitter scholars, Facebook scholars. Nobody knows where they studied from. Okay, and all they do is they take out hadith and they show you that they are authentic, their words are authentic, and then they give a meaning, their own meaning to it. But we ask that just like you showed that they are authentic by citing the books you've taken from, I've taken it from Bukhari, I've taken it from Muslim, so that shows that the words are authentic. But what about the meaning of those hadiths? The meaning that you're giving to them, is that authentic as well? I need to see the meaning, the sanad of the meaning as well. And what is the sanad of the meaning? The sanad of the meaning is the four schools of fiqh. Fiqh al-Hanafiya, fiqh al-Malikiyya, fiqh al-Shafi'iyya, and fiqh al-Hanbaliyya. These four schools of fiqh. Fiqh is the meaning and the interpretation of Quran and Sunnah. Okay. So if it is not present in any of these four, then your interpretation is something that you have devised, and we don't accept it because it's not authentic. I have to see it. And this should be the one of the first of the thing that any Muslim, any pious, any God-fearing Muslim should be asking for any one of those who is trying to sell these things today. That show me the sanad of the meaning of these hadiths. You are saying this hadith means this. Okay, what did the previous scholar said about that? Show me that. The sanad means in every era, people should talk about that. Scholars should talk about that. And I should see that in the books and the statements of the scholars. I'm telling you the sanad of all of those previous scholars, of the prominent one of those in different eras of time. I'm showing you that the sanad. This is my sanad of the meaning of those hadiths. Not only that I showed you the hadiths and I cited Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim that indicate the sanad of the words of hadith, not of the meaning. Remember, the books of hadith are the sanad of the words, but I can put a different meaning. Fiqh is the sanad of the meaning. People manipulate that. For example, the word Khatamun Nabiyyin had from the time of Rasulullah had no difference of opinions. That the word means also that the end of prophethood, and the meaning of it, interpretation is also that the prophethood is ended, no new prophet is going to come. And Rasulullah is the last of the prophets. No new prophet is going to come afterwards. But a group emerged called the Qadianis, which give you the same sanad of the words, but they change its interpretation. They say, oh, Khatam al-Nabiyyin, it doesn't mean that. Its meaning is a stamp. Rasulullah had a stamp, a a ring that he would wear, and he would use it to stamp on papers. And Rasulullah is the Khatam al-Nabiyyin, because he is now the stamp. After him, he can put a stamp on anybody, and that anybody could become a prophet. It doesn't mean Khatam doesn't mean the end. Khatam means the stamp, and Rasulullah can stamp on anybody, and that person can become a prophet. So it doesn't really mean the end of the prophet. Na'udzubillah, astaghfirullah, zalik min zalik. That's how the meanings are changed. They will show you all the sanad of the words, and people get misguided. They become astray, just like this. No. We need the interpretation. We need the interpretation, the meaning. Prove us that all the ummat for the last 1450 years took the meaning of Khatam as you are explaining, and they will never be able to do that. Similarly, anyone who will like to play around with people, okay, and use deen to get their worldly benefits, they will take you directly to the Hadith of Rasulullah. They will take you directly to the Quran. And when you say, okay, what did other people pray? They said, look, I'm telling you the Hadith of Prophet, and I'm telling you the verse of Quran. Isn't that enough for you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? وَاتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ مَنْ أَنَابَ إِلَيَّ. Follow the path of those, follow the interpretation of those, follow the path of those who turn towards me. Allah has talked about the sanad of people. In Surah Al-Fatiha, which we are asked to recite many times a day, at least about 17 or 20 times a day, if you count all of the rakat or the 5 salat. In that Surah Al-Fatiha, when talking about the hidayah and the guidance, what does it mean? What does it say? Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Oh Allah, show us the right path. And what is the right path? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have told over there Sirat al-Quran and done. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said over there Sirat al-Rasul and done. Or could have said Sirat al-Sunnah and done. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never used the word Quran, Sirat al-Quran, or Sirat al-Rasul, or Sirat al-Sunnah, or whatever. Allah said, Sirat al-Lazina an'amta alayhim. Follow the path of those people whom Allah have blessed. Okay, who Allah have blessed. Those are the guided people. And then later on in the Quran, the definition of an'amta alayhim, mun'am alayhim, those people who were blessed with Allah, blessed by Allah. Who are they? An-Nabiyun, was-Siddiqun, was-Shuhada, was-Salihun. 4 groups of people that are present. Out of those, prophethood is ended. Out of those, prophethood is ended. But Siddiqeen, Shuhada, and Salihin will always be there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have turned people and turned us toward these group. And what it implies is, Allah is saying, look, in every era, in every time, there will be a group of people who will come up and who will give new interpretations of the Quran and Hadith, and they will try to fool you and try to lead you away. But don't be fooled, okay? Because you always turn towards people who are the righteous people, and what they interpret, take that interpretation. And what were the right Imam An-Nawawi? Who will dispute the status of Imam An-Nawawi? Okay, then Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, a very big name, he also upheld local citing, stating that every region should follow its own citing based on the understanding of the Sahaba. Then you move and you come to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Who could refute, who could contradict the position of Imam Abu Hanifa? Okay, so these are the people whose interpretation and whose understanding we are asked, we're commanded by Allah and His Rasul to follow. Sirat al-Lazina an'amta alayhim. Their interpretation of Quran and Hadith is reliable. Not anyone of today. Okay, if it goes against them, we will reject them, because they were the people of the depth of no knowledge. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah said, the ruling of fasting and Eid is based on citing and not on calculations, as according to Sunnah Rasulullah. Imam Malik rahimahullah said that the following the established practice of the Prophet ﷺ, the community must base its fasting and Eid on local moonsighting, not on global moonsighting. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said, if the sighting of the moon in one region were to be binding upon all, okay, the Prophet ﷺ would have commanded it explicitly. In his Kitabul is one of the very, very famous books. What is Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah saying? If Rasulullah, if global moon sighting was okay, would have been okay, would have been permissible, Rasulullah SAW would have commanded. And Imam Shafi is a very old scholar. That issue had been discussed a long time ago. A long time ago. It's not an issue at all. Don't let anyone take you for a ride on that. Don't let anyone take you for a ride on that. That, oh, this is a new issue. This is not an issue. Scholars have discussed it, debated in detail, and threw it away. It's not acceptable. Ever. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahimahullah, the sunnah is to accept the testimony of reliable witness for moon sighting in each region and not to depend on calculation. So he refuted, he disposed of global moon sighting, he disposed of calculations. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah, such a big name. He's a writer of the famous commentary and Sharah of Sahih Bukhari, which is called Fath al-Bari, one of the most authentic and the most popular commentary made on Sahih Bukhari. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said, the hadith of Kuraib, which I just told you, the hadith of Kuraib is a clear evidence that local moon sighting was the practice of the companions of Rasulullah SAW. And this is what should be followed. Imam Qadi Ayad, rahimahullah, a very, very prominent scholar, says the unity of the ummah is in following the sunnah against the practice of Rasulullah and his companions. People are looking for unity. This is another thing I'm going to address a little bit in more detail, and we'll talk about that also. But Imam Qadi al-Ayad, rahimahullah, is clearly mentioning that if you're going for unity, unity lies in only following the sunnah of Rasulullah and that of the Prophet, of the companions. Against their practice, there's no sense of unity. There's no concept of unity. We will never unite with anyone. Never, ever unite with anyone who go against Rasulullah's practice and who go against the practice of the Sahaba. Okay, let's take a couple of quotations from the present day scholars. People go for Saudi scholars now. One of the most prominent scholars of Saudi, which is no longer present, but his name is Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah. He says in his fatwa, astronomical calculations have no basis in Sharia. What is legislated is sighting with the naked eye as commanded by Rasulullah SAW. Khalas. End of the story. Sheikh Uthaymeen, another prominent scholar of Saudi who died in 2001, he stated, rahimahullah, every country should have its own independent moon sighting and calculations should not be relied upon. So he also rejected both ideas. First of all, global moon sighting, no. He said every country should have its own independent moon sighting. Khalas. Then calculations cannot be relied upon. You can use them as an evidence. You can use them to support things, but the decisive factor will be Sharia. Okay, and the Sharia says visual moon sighting. That'll be the decisive one. Lastly, Sayyidina Mufti Taqi Usmani, Damat Barakatuh, he says, is a very prominent scholar, international scholar of Pakistan. He said the strongest view in light of the Sunnah and historical practices is that moon sighting should remain regional and local. Khalas, no global moon sighting. Nobody agrees on that. So this fitna originated only in those places where Muslims started mingling with Western culture, and then they had to please some of the people there for their worldly benefits, and taking the agenda of integrating with them. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. So, okay. In today's, and I say that again and again. I'm very, very upset about this issue, and I'm sad about that issue. That a very big reason of all of these misguidances creeping into the Muslim Ummah is because of the decline of the reading habits. especially in Islamic books, Islamic history, even general history, you won't find many people who are really aware of these things, and they just rely on YouTube videos and scholars without verification. Okay, so I urge my brothers and sisters in Islam to return to the tradition of acquiring divine precision and practicality. Our acts of worship are not based on blind conformity, but on clear guidance from Rasulullah. Moonsighting is no exception. It is meant to be a local, verifiable act, not an imposed global standard that leads to uncertainty and deviation from the Sunnah. Okay. Again, some people bring up a unity argument, and some argue that unity is the ultimate goal, and therefore we should accept global moon sighting or calculation to bring all Muslims together. No, unity is not the ultimate goal. Okay, unity must be on based on the Sunnah of Rasulullah and the command of Allah, not against it. If a large number of Muslims are to decide, for example, that Maghrib Salah should have 4 rakats instead of 3 because it seems more logical or rewarding, would that make it acceptable? Certainly not. Okay, so unity can only be only when it aligns with the teaching of Islam. When it not follow the unity, Islam is not about following the majority opinion, even if it contradicts Sunnah. So the ultimate proof, the Prophet ﷺ and the closest companions who had the most accurate understanding of did not use any of these methods. So why should we introduce it now? The other issue faced by Muslims, particularly those living in the Western countries, because there's no Islamic government there to make a decision, so there are individual Muslim bodies that emerge, is that unfortunately those who strive to follow the correct Sunnah, the local moon sighting, in accordance with the Sunnah and Sharia, they often start to face criticism and pressure. They're labeled as the cause of disunity and accused of creating unnecessary division among Muslims. However, we must not allow this pressure to mislead us, because the commands of Allah and His Prophet ﷺ, they take more importance over public opinion. And any modification in deen is highly prohibited, no matter how minor it may seem. On the other hand, some people start raising it as a minor issue, and they say, look, we've got bigger fish to fry, we've got bigger issues to settle, and you're just arguing about a simple moon sighting thing. Look, come on, like, we're already divided, don't divide us further, there are more important things to take care of. Look, the most important thing to take care of at any moment of time, in any era, is what is the correct or hukum of Allah, and what is the correct practice of Rasulullah. Okay, this is not a trivial matter. Moon sighting is not a trivial matter. Our obligatory acts of worship, which is fasting in Ramadan, celebrating Eid, and performing Hajj, all are directly tied to sighting. We cannot afford to be careless about this matter. And more importantly, the root cause of the decline of the Ummah today, okay, is precisely our deviation from Allah's commands and the Sunnah of Rasulullah. So our responsibility is to follow the commands of Allah and His Messenger ﷺ without compromise, regardless of the pressure to conform to popular opinion. True unity is achieved when the entire Ummah submits to the divine commandments, not when we sacrifice the Sunnah for the sake of convenience. Another major challenge faced by modern Muslims, particularly those living in the West, is their interaction with non-Muslims at both social and governmental levels. I've seen, because I've lived in America and Australia for 15 years, I've been an imam in both places, I've led people. I know how things work over there. Many Muslims engage in interfaith activities or community leadership roles. They attempt to integrate into society by hosting Eid events and inviting governmental officials. And in doing so, they feel pressured to provide exact dates for Eid in advance so that these officials can schedule the event in their calendars. This leads them to seek a fixed system, and then they go for calculations and stuff so that they can in advance determine all of those things, so they can make the governmental officials that they're inviting happy. Okay, so rather than upholding the Sunnah, they begin justifying and twisting religious evidences to support their approach, just to gain worldly benefits, donations for mosque and stuff and whatever. This is a grave sin. Must be understood that we are leading to a big kabira sin on this thing. distorting religious evidences and teachings for material gain is not only dishonest but also haram. And those who prioritize political or financial advantages over Allah's commands are definitely they're putting their akhirat at risk for temporary worldly benefits. Islam does not require us to distort its principles to please others. Our religion is divinely preserved and its rulings are not subject to change for the sake of political convenience. If non Muslims need clarity, we should educate them about our traditions rather than our rulings, rather than compromising our deen. The Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they never altered their practices to accommodate external pressures, and neither should we. Okay? The integrity of our religion or religious obligations is far, far more important than gaining approval from worldly authorities. And as Muslims, we must have strong conviction and belief that our success lies in following Allah's commandments and the Sunnah of the Rasulullah. So, based on the Quran, Sunnah, the practice of the Sahaba, determining Islamic months is by local moon sighting. The idea of global moon sighting contradicts the practice of the Sahaba, and relying on astronomical calculations contradicts the explicit teachings of Rasulullah. For the preservation of Islamic teachings, and the unity of local communities, Muslims should continue follow traditional local sighting methods as has been prescribed for the last 40 and 50 years, and no one should uh, learn any other thing. Okay, let you believe any other thing. This is the only right way and the way of the Prophet ﷺ and his blessed companions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to follow the Sunnah in all aspects of our worship. And let's make dua inshallah and finish our talk. Allahumma lakal hamdu kama anta alu fasalli sallim ala Muhammadin kama anta waf'al bina kama anta fa innaka hal tuqa al maghfira. Allahumma arina al haqqa haqqan warzuqna tib'ahu wa arina al batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Allahumma ahdina wa hdi bina waj'alna sababa liman ihtada. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala habibi wa barik sallam. Amin 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 ya rabbal alamin.